let's get started. Welcome to this Marris Consulting webinar. This is the first in what will be a series of webinars that are not, in fact, hosted or explained by Marris Consulting, but by companies that we know. And so today, Aerosud is going to present this webinar, and I'm very pleased to be starting with them because I don't know, thousands of companies using theory constraints in various ways. And as far as I'm concerned, Aerosud is the company that uses theory constraints the best in the world in the domain of small and medium enterprise. They're 700 people, and they're based in South Africa. So really, I'm very pleased that we could get them to present their story as they will today. Okay, just to go through a few practical details, this webinar is 60 minutes long of a presentation, and that will be followed by 30 minutes of questions and answers. You will be able to have a copy of all the slides at any time. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a link to download them in PDF form, or you can go back and pick them up on the Marris Consulting website at any time. Okay, there are in fact in total 5 of us going to be talking to you in various ways today. There are 3 people from Aerosud who are going to present themselves, Johan, Steyn, and 2 of his colleagues. Myself, but don't worry, I'm going to shut up most of the time today. And then there's also Jessica, who will be reading all your questions and remarks that you can make with the chat box, the Q&A box. Okay, so that she can then digest all those questions and host the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. Okay, and don't be surprised, you'll also get a few pop-up questions that turn up. You're free to answer or not answer them on a number of subjects, like what is your knowledge of the theory constraints and so forth. Okay, so now without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Johan Steyn of Aerosud. Hello, Johan, are you there? Because of course I'm in Paris and he's in Johannesburg. There he is. Okay, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. It's great to be with you all. Thank you for the opportunity to work with you, first of all, in an international webinar like this. I have to admit it's our first time and we're learning a lot. So we really appreciate the fact that we could be working with yourselves and that we could be sharing our story this afternoon. So we greet you out of the capital city of South Africa, also known as Pretoria, and it is also sometimes known as Tshwane. So very nice to be with you, and we hope that we can give you a bit of insight into our story of the past 30 years. I'm privileged to lead a team of very talented and very committed individuals in South Africa and in Aerosud. I have been at the company myself for 30 years. And this afternoon, we want to share with you some of the highlights of that journey. We obviously had some lowlights as well, but we prefer not to spend time on that today. So I want to start with this picture because it also demonstrates the unique demographic reality of South Africa, our political past, and it's also really important for me to stress that we have an integrated and really inclusive workforce already over the last 30 years. What is important for me to note as well is that our workforce has an average age of 35 years. And that is purely because we have invested significant time and effort into training young people and uplifting young people. 30% of our production workforce is, for example, females. So we are really very proud of that. And hopefully you will see that also out of our story this afternoon. Obviously, the last 3 months we have been disrupted by the same COVID pandemic that we all had. And we are in the process of readjusting our workforce. We had a shutdown in South Africa of 5 weeks. Over the last 4 weeks, we have started to reestablish the business going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about pre- and post-COVID activities as well. The three of us, I calculated this morning, have in excess of 100 years of experience in aviation, design, certification, manufacturing, and associated activities. So I'm the one that will do the introduction. Then I will hand over to Tustin, who is responsible for the supply chain, synchronization, and continuous improvement activities. He'll do most of the presentation. And then I'll hand over to Jeff Esterhuizen, who is responsible for operational systems, and he will take us through the rest of the presentation and towards the end. I'd like to, at this point in time, use the opportunity to play a short video. We call it the Why video. Excellent. So I will proceed then to share with you the rest of the introduction as well. This slide is very busy, but it aims to show the key characteristics of our business. You'll see on the left top, we are 660 people. We have an annual turnover of $70 million US. All of that is for the export market. We also spent some money on research and development. Mostly in the domain of digital solutions and also 3D printing associated with design for certification, software, and automation methodologies. Our supply chain in South Africa is in the order of 15 companies that we work with very closely that have the necessary quality approvals. It is a small ecosystem in South Africa. Yet we can integrate these companies as well. A key feature of our business and one of the difficulties that we need to manage being in the southern tip of South Africa or Africa is the fact that we have 300 international suppliers. So the supply chain is of course dictated by the OEMs and that makes it a fairly interesting channel to manage that. And we'll share with you some methodologies that we've developed in doing that. Then the local content of our business is around 40%. And that makes it a fairly interesting manufacturing proposition in a country like South Africa, notwithstanding the fact that we are far away from the raw material supply and or the customers. At the bottom of the page, you will see some of the quality approvals that we hold. Of course, in this domain, the international quality requirements, the third-party requirements, etc., are mandated upon us. And of course, we have to comply to all of those. Then lastly, on the right-hand side, you will see our 5 customers. And our business is divided almost equally between those 5 customers. In the next slide, I'll share with you also the roadmap of how we got to where we are. The company was formed in 1990. We came out of a defense historic background, I would say. During the 90s, we took very deliberate activities and actions to diversify into commercial aviation manufacturing. You can see there we started to work with Boeing in 2000, was our first breakthrough. Later on with Airbus and Safran. Later on still with Spirit Aerosystems. And what was a very important turning point for us was the opportunity to become a design and build risk share partner on the A400M program. That obviously tested our design engineering certification skills in a fully integrated, in a fully concurrent engineering, heavily system engineering and certification process that we could really practice in real life. That was a big learning for us. And we have 6 different work packages on the A400M that we are still a design and build partner for today. In 2014, the organization underwent a restructuring where we finally separated all defense or military type work from the company. And in the last 5 years, we have specifically invested in new technology in composite manufacturing capability in a company called Aerosud Technology Solutions. And last but not least, in 2018, we have created a new entity called Aerosud Opti. And we will be talking, Jeff, in fact, will be talking to that quite a bit towards the end. This slide aims to show the technologies that we have in the company, the manufacturing skills, and the level of detailed processes that we perform, which is shown in the inner circle. And then if you look at the outer circle, you will see also the language of assemblies. Clearly, you can mix and match several technologies into a final product. And that is then the outer circle. What is important also to note is that we have some very specific digital product skills and experience in the company that was developed over many years. We have a strong system engineering understanding and capability, wide capability in the organization. We have, as you would have seen from the quality approval side, well-embedded quality and operational SOPs and systems, most of them digital. And last but not least, we are also well equipped with ICT skills and those kinds of skills in our company. Then I think lastly, what I want to share with you as well is that we also have interests in 2 specific companies in our supply chain. One is a machining company, Daylif, down in the beautiful Cape Town, and another company that is part of Testia, which is an Airbus-owned entity, a company that specializes in non-destructive testing, and you see their logo there next to it. Then from a industry support and development perspective, we also get involved with SME development or startup development. On the left-hand bottom there, you see 2 examples. The first one, Adept Airmotive, is in fact a South African designed, non-certified internal combustion engine for general aviation. And the other company is Dynamic Aerotech, which is a startup company aimed at getting involved in manufacturing, non-destructive testing, and similar future technologies. This slide aims to just show you a few snapshots of types of product that we manufacture. As you would have seen from the previous slides, we have a metallic and composite technology, systems capability, electrical wiring capability, and we can also put full assemblies together, test them, and release them. Probably some of the more complex assemblies that we do and have done in the past is single aisle galley sets for A320-like aircraft or 737 type aircraft. Then maybe moving on to really the discussion around TOC, and as a lead into Andre's session, here I think it's important to really talk just a little bit about how do we set the goal, how did we set the goal, and how did we make the links that we did make. For us, clearly the goal is to be an ever-flourishing company now and in the future. Practically, it probably means that we need to increase the throughput, we need to minimize the operating expense, and we have to minimize investment. The classical TIOE measures and methodologies. For us, we had the first opportunity to read the goal in 2008. The truth is we understood the three things above, the TIOE, but we did not know where to start. And it took us a couple of years before we actually managed to get a grip on that. And probably since 2012, we actually started to implement some very specific improvements and specific programs. The other big event, I think, for us that's worth mentioning here is our exposure specifically to the logical thinking process with the famous Bill Detmer. We had the opportunity, in fact, to participate in a logical thinking process for the first time in Paris with Philip, in fact, and with Bill, of course. Myself and Andre completed that course. We liked it so much and we thought it was that useful that we then invited Bill to come to South Africa. Bill then came to South Africa and we had the opportunity to put 15 of our senior management and a few of our SMEs actually through the full course with Bill. I think he loved South Africa, we loved having him here, and that gave us really a significant boost to create a wider understanding of how the logical thinking process works, how you link it with the goal setting, and how do you actually then see it through. To the point that in, I think it was 2018, we actually took the bold step to publish our goal tree and to hang it in our front door. So this is in our reception area, together with our other certificates and accreditations and things like that. We decided to put up our goal tree there. It's also worth noting that we've reviewed the goal tree several times and improved it, not fundamentally changed it, I have to admit, but to improve the areas that were not performing as expected. And in fact, we have a new goal tree that will be published and be in the entrance probably in the next couple of weeks, in fact. Then the last slide that I'd like to discuss with you is also our journey to really look at how to build and to capitalize on our investments and on our learnings. As I said, in 2018, we published the first goal tree. At that time, we specifically looked at what else do we have to offer? What else can we monetize in some way or the other? Up to that point, we've essentially focused on what we call the hardware premium, making things and delivering things, the widget factory, if you want. But then we also started to realize that we are in an age of digitalization. Industry 4.0 became the buzzword all around. And we also realized that we have opportunity to create a service revenue stream, potentially a data revenue stream, and in future, maybe even a networked business solution. And it was out of those learnings that we then basically created the company called Aerosud Octai. Thank you very much for that section. I'm going to hand you over to my co-presenter, Andre Tustin.
Thank you very much, Johan, for that great company introduction. My name is Andre Tustin. I'm the Continuous Improvement Manager here at Aerosud. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing this great TOC journey with you and the way we actually build our company on TOC foundations. I think the good place to start our story is to take you all back roughly a year back in time. Let's call it the pre-COVID-19 timeframe. The aviation market was basically flourishing, and I think there was very little forecast in the aviation market that didn't actually represent double figures of growth. Basically, if we go to this first slide, you will see there that I've done an extract from the Airbus global market forecast. And as you can see there immediately, that there's basically in the next 10 years, 16,000 aircraft to be built, which equates roughly to about 1,600 aircraft per year, which is massive. So not too very long ago, pre-COVID, we actually had a market reality of a 40% rate increase in our market. Together with this, hand in hand, goes a 20% cost reduction drive, manufacturers starting to compete for profitability. Hand in hand with that is also global collaboration and obviously deal sourcing to take away the risk in the supply chain, and also a strong emphasis on innovation in our market. Obviously, this has lots of effects on the market and drives various behaviors within this market reality. Issues like price reduction drives, global low-cost sourcing, risk management oversight. But I think basically the core of this underlying conflict in doing business in this market is the resulting conflict that we all sit with is of profitability versus reliability. On the one hand, to become more and more reliable, you have to spend money on your supply chain, spending money on expediting stock to the OEMs and customers. And on the other hand, the more you spend money on the supply chain and risk mitigation, the less profitable you are because you're spending money on these type of functionalities. So in our market reality, the whole time there's this constant conflict between profitability and reliability, and there's a fine line and balance that you should keep in the market, being a player in this market. So basically, we said to ourselves to survive and thrive in this market. We, on the one hand, looked at the critical success factors of aircraft manufacturers in today's market. And basically, there's three key elements or three major critical success factors that we can look at, which is to produce more. In other words, there's more throughput in the system, to reduce WIP and speed for more money, and obviously to improve efficiency and to reduce costs. When we looked at theory of constraints for the first time, we see similarities in this critical success factors. And theory of constraints had a great track record of increasing throughput, reducing investment and WIP, and also improving flow and efficiencies in your systems. So when we looked at these two next to each other, we actually realized that TOC is actually the perfect fit, or they call it the match made in heaven, basically, for Aerosud and being a manufacturer of aircraft and be living in that sort of market. So obviously, we started implementing TOC. We did not do it all alone. We like to acknowledge our partners that helped us on this journey. We ourselves are not TOC purists. We apply and practice TOC principles in a combination with other business practices that you will see and that we'll talk about. But basically, these guys actually helped us across our journey and basically to tell the story here today. Basically, then we can move on to the next chapter that I would like to tell you the story about. And basically, we've given the background of the aviation market now and why we chose TOC. So I think the next chapter in this story is basically telling you how we apply TOC in our strategy operations and also our cultural developments in Aerosud. I think from the very start of building our company, we realized that there's three critical elements that needs to work in harmony in order to achieve sustainable results. And those were obviously strategy, operations, and culture. And I think basically in layman's terms, it's basically asking yourselves who we are, what we're going to achieve, and how are we going to get there. And I think it's only when these three elements actually are working in harmony that you embrace market turbulence, you deliver faster, more cost effective, you have a happy and cohesive workforce, and you really optimize your return on investment. So obviously creating a sustainable results when these three elements work in harmony. So again, on the right-hand side, we looked at TOC as a knowledge base, and we realized that each of these three elements you can actually found in this knowledge base and methodology. And we started matching these up. What I would do is I would actually work clockwise around this wheel and literally just briefly touch on each of the implementations that we've done in TOC in each of these elements. So if we start right at the top, from a strategic implementation, we used a lot the goal tree and throughput accounting. I think for those of you that have not dealt with a goal tree, I think Johan quickly explained to you how we formulated our goal tree in the company. But for those of you that are not familiar with it, basically a goal tree is part of the logical thinking process written by Bill Detmer. It's a very simplistic and visual tool. Obviously, after you've mastered it for a couple of years, then it becomes a very simplistic tool. And it basically breaks down your goal into one big page, easy to read. So if you would like to imagine a typical tree with the top part of the tree being your ultimate goal or your vision for your company, the next level would be basically your critical success factors that will support that goal. A very simplistic example is that if you like to catch fish and your goal is actually to catch a fish, the critical success factors in order to catch that fish would be obviously you need to have maybe good bait, you would have to have a fishing rod, and maybe some good patience to be able to catch that fish. So typically how you would read that goal tree is you would ask yourself, in order to achieve the goal, I must obviously then have a fishing rod, bait, and obviously I must be willing to have a lot of patience in order to catch that fish. So once formulating this goal tree, it is really easy to share with the rest of the company as it is on a one-pager, and the logic actually tests itself when presenting this goal tree to the rest of the company. Basically, next to the throughput accounting is basically measuring these results. In short, throughput accounting is basically accounting methodology, the opposite of cost accounting, or actually the enemy of cost accounting. Throughput accounting actually acknowledges that you have a constraint in your system and that you basically focus your measurements on these constraints in your system in order to actually maximize the output of your system. All right, so the second, call it element of our implementation was focusing on our operations. There, obviously in our production, inventory management, project management areas, we've implemented some of the TOC methodologies. If I can start on the right top, on the production and operation side, we basically use critical constraint resource management, and hand in hand with that goes the 5 focusing step and lean. So if I can again quickly explain to you how critical constraint resource management work. Basically, as a company, we acknowledge that there's a constraint in our factory. And just like a weakest link in a chain, you identify this weakest link and you actually try and exploit this link. So you actually realize that your output of your whole factory is actually dependent on one constraint. So then you actually go and you use the 5 focusing steps, again, quickly explaining those. The first step is usually to identify the constraint in your factory. Not always the easiest to do, but after some consultation and some walkarounds, you should be able to actually identify this constraint. Once you've identified your constraint, you basically move on to an exploitation phase. In the exploitation phase, you actually try and open up this constraint and actually increase its capacity. At this stage, we use a lot of lean tools that takes wastage and unnecessary time wastage out of your constraint area. Once you've exploited your constraint, you will obviously move on to subordination. Subordination is basically supporting your CCR or your constrained area. And basically, you can use tools like drum buffer rope, where you actually drumbeat basically only on your constraints throughput and not overproducing on other cells feeding your CCR. Otherwise, you actually overproduce whip into the system. And also small elements like quality, making sure your quality is 100% correct by the time it gets to the CCR, that there's no time waste on sub-quality products that you will rather just chuck away and lose that capacity and time wastage. Then basically, after you've subordinated, you elevate. Elevate, I usually tell myself it's throw money at the problem, and usually you pay for actually creating more capacity by either paying for overtime, buying new machinery, and by doing that, you're actually exploiting the constraint again by broadening your constraint and make it sort of better flow. Then from there, it's basically repeat the steps from 1 to 4 and don't sleep, and that we call PUGI in theory of constraints. It's a process of ongoing improvement, taking that cycle and repeating it as much as possible until you've taken the most waste out of the system. Then if we move on to inventory management, we've implemented buffer management. Buffer management is a great visual tool to manage your inventory levels in your factory. It basically, you set it up by basically looking at the maximum demand in a lead time to replenish. So first of all, you will look at stock levels and basically setting that stock levels in place. And then from there, it basically dynamically adjusts itself by visual coding, which is green, orange, red. Green means your stock levels is at a good place. Orange, you start to plan around these stock levels. And once these stock levels reach red, you really try to expedite the stock being available and obviously make exceptional plans to make it happen. Critical chain project management in our project management environment, I'll touch a bit later on in more detail. From a marketing and sales perspective, we've actually created the unrefusable offer. Very briefly again, unrefusable offer is actually really understanding your customer and his sort of market in which he operates and his pains that he feels, and then really going to extra length to take away that pains for the customer and actually give him an offer that is really unrefusable in such terms. Then also a sales and marketing solution, like we've done through the factory, getting optimal flow through the factory in the ways of a product. We use an offer to create that same flow. So from a lead that we get in the market right up to execution of that lead into a product and an order, we actually manage that flow through the system. Then lastly, we looked at culture. There we've built a strategy and tactics stream that was called Inspiring and Managing People. As we realized, without people, you can't really implement TOC, and basically this is one of the core elements. Obviously, combining this together, it obviously gives you sustainable results, and to make sure that we actually withhold those sort of sustainable results, we've actually implemented Clokomela Partners, which is like change agents in our system that basically adopts this theory and implements it in the rest of the company. and also the culture of this methodology. They spread all over the company and through learning. By the way, Tlokomela partners, Tlokomela is the Tswana word for focus, which is actually one of the core fundamentals of theory of constraints. All right, so obviously everybody would like to know, so what did it actually do in your company? What was the results that you achieved? I think first of all, from a production point of view and our facility, internal product lead time reduction we achieved from 50 days to 70 days, which is exceptional. This caused a high reliability and completion date. We were able to manage to reduce our inventory throughout our value chain by the likes of $5 million. And this was basically by using the TOC methodology of constraint focus management, like I explained, the 5 focusing steps, as well as buffer management to reduce the dependency and variability actually in our system. We've also improved our on-time delivery from 92 to 98%. And I think the key message here is basically that we actually buffered for the variability, because our suppliers always don't give us a full 100% availability of material, but by following a buffer management philosophy, we could actually increase our on-time delivery to our customers. Reduction in the delay raw materials from 8 to 1.5%, and TOC we call that a full kit, making sure that you've got all the material in order to manufacture your product. They are out of stock, went from out 8% roughly to about 1.5%. And again, through using buffer management on our inbound supply chain, we managed to achieve this exceptional results. As a consequence, we opened up a lot of manufacturing capacity, and that actually escalated to a 20% increase in work volume from our customers. And as a result of on-time delivery, we were able to achieve this tremendous increase in work volume as well. Then obviously, we've got a lot of industrialization work, where new product development and introducing new products into our company. This lead time we took from 120 days to about 80 days. And I'll briefly explain to you when we look at critical chain project management, how you're able to achieve this type of exceptional results. Then from a strategy point of view, we actually define a clear strategy that people could relate with, and obviously it's easy to communicate to the rest of the company and for individuals themselves to align with this goal and to align with their own goals as well. We've also used the goal tree for risk management, as it being the risk of not achieving the goal helps you easily identify what is the risks that you have to manage as a company and how would you mitigate these risks in order to secure that you reach your goal. Then the last element obviously is the cultural element. Obviously we achieved a happy, cohesive and adaptive workforce with a real strong problem-solving culture. I think this is also fundamental in theory of constraints, is to have a culture with a strong problem-solving element, because TOC obviously helps you to think out of the box and challenges the normal just status quo of the day. And then obviously employees adopting a sound culture that obviously helps strengthening this whole bond in Aerosud. All right, there is just a lovely picture of us standing at our goal tree. This is basically right across our coffee station. And the intent of this is that employees have the opportunity to read through this goal tree while having a coffee, and obviously trying to align themselves with having to achieve this goal of the company. All right, the last part of the slide. Basically, there's very little companies that we are aware of that really has a strong TOC and call it information technology ability. And I think we use this strength actually to build the TOC foundation right into our company and our methodology by using this IT, call it strong digital skills. So we obviously have a very strong integrated systems in Aerosud, and we actually use TOC to actually make it a way of life in Aerosud as well. So just for background and reference, I thought it will be a good idea to give you a brief overview of the Aerosud value chain. As you can see, we basically have suppliers, international suppliers, and basically they create demand on the Aerosud supply chain. Key accounts, which is actually I'll call it a customer-focused area, and they basically pass the work on either to industrialization in actually creating more new products that we can manufacture. Then we get a procurement and stock management area that actually procures for the manufacture of the items, and then our manufacturing. And I think the four that I would literally quickly run over is the SKU integration between these, call it value chain elements, as well as the industrialization, where we've implemented critical chain project management, also procurement and stock management, our outbound logistics, as well as a bit of manufacturing in our supply chain. I think basically why I've included this term is just to illustrate how seamlessly we can integrate sort of stock SKUs between really PLM management and other product lifecycle management, developing products, and then taking those products into our ERP system and manufacturing environments and getting good information and stock management out of these SKUs and managing them right through the value chain. Then obviously from our industrialization and project management, we use critical chain project management. For those of you that haven't actually heard about critical chain project management, it's a real easy and effective theory of constraints management tool that can really sort of increase your product, decrease your product lead time by 20 to 30%. Very briefly, how it works is obviously ask people usually when doing a project how long they will take. Natural ability of the person, he will actually build some fat into his planning, and you'll end up probably with a 4 months lead time. You ask the same question to the same individual, but differently. You ask him that he only focuses on that specific task and on average how long it will take him. And obviously, he mustn't build any fat into it, just focusing on the task. Usually by law, the lead time actually reduces to half, which is then in this case 2 months. Obviously, there's still risk associated with the project, so you add a natural lead time of 1/3 just to cover for any anomalies in the project. Then you actually determine the critical chain based on resources and task dependencies, and basically you create a task path, which is then the critical chain. Then execution becomes very easy. Basically, based on a color coding of red, orange, and green, a manager can run his project. And obviously, only when it actually hits red, the manager has to really intervene and making sure that those projects actually end on time. So in Aerosud, we basically use it for planning, execution, and then obviously control, where managers obviously manage their project based on a portfolio fever chart. I think in the start, you might find it a bit funny that we have a Superman right here on the screen. In the start, to bring the principle home, here at Aerosud, we used action figures to represent the critical chain. So when one person was finished with his task, he will hand over this action figure to the next person on the critical chain. And there was basically a standing rule that whenever you see an action figure on somebody's desk, it means that he's a critical resource in the critical chain and that he needs to focus on this specific task at hand. So please don't interrupt. Later on, we actually replace this with more electronic systems like a Kanban ice. Then quickly, briefly, on our inbound supply chain, we manage about 300 stock codes. And basically, in short, we've actually taken from a, call it MRP system to a consumption-based replenishment system. And what we've done is basically giving the ability of the inbound supply chain managers to manage through the system on a TOC way. So just briefly, we actually do dynamic buffer management per SKU in our tempo system. We can measure flow performance, actually get recommendations or requisitions and basically to the superiors for approval and creation of PO, all basically automated from TOC principles and recommendations. Supply reports based on buffer penetration. I think the thing I have to emphasize here is that we have the ability to actually go right into our supplier's supply chain by virtue of sending him reports and actually indicating what status a certain stock code is actually active in Aerosud system. Is it, for example, a black pack? Then that supplier would know that he has to expedite those specific stock codes and orders and make sure that those actually reach us as soon as possible. We're also developing DDMRP at the moment, which will be complementary to our current system, and then generation requisition of what to order, system or recommendation basically on your stock levels, and automatic requisitions will be actually placed through our system. Then briefly, the last slide, our management execution system. That's basically our made-ins, our work in progress management in Aerosud. We manage about 6,800 SKUs, which 4,500 is about MTO, and the other MTO parts of about 2,300. Again, managing about 50 flow streams with CCRs, and basically the system gives us the ability to manage these CCRs visually by seeing what the performance of each individual CCR is. How does that basically buffer management status look of a certain value stream? Also SKU flow performance, seeing where that SKU basically spends most of its time, where you need to exploit that specific flow. Also value stream performance, where you can see exactly where your WIP is building up and how you can actually exploit that WIP. And then obviously what's very key to TOC is actually looking at your priorities per cell operator. So your factory has the ability to see exactly which priorities to work on right on the screen. And obviously this takes away a lot of conflict in the operational environment. All right, so basically that's it from me. I'm going to introduce Jeff now basically, and he's going to take us through the next chapter of the story.
Andre has alluded somewhat earlier, and Johan as well, is we have a significant new market reality. The COVID-19 scenario is a totally disruptive reality. We see that there's a 40% reduction in production rates in the aviation industry. We see that the supply chain costs increased by approximately 20%. Strategies of companies are rapidly changing from made-ins now becoming bought outs. And we see that there's a global supply chain disruption. And this will test us how we will respond to these challenges. It will test our innovation and our ability to diversify and digitalize the environment. And on top of this has a result in a conflict between stability versus growth. Johan has mentioned that we're in the process of reviewing our business model, but right now the first thing we have to do is to stabilize the company under these new and uncertain conditions, and then to position ourselves for growth going forward. It is important to note that we have no plan to exit manufacturing as such. What was important for us was to revisit our goal tree to confirm what we are trying to achieve. And once we've done that, we could confirm that our goal did not change at all. Our objectives, therefore, remain to increase throughput, and this is where the conflict between growth and stability is evident. We have to minimize our operating expenses by reviewing our business structure, and this is currently going. We have to minimize our investment by tools such as dynamic buffer management, all as per the textbook. However, I also want to share with you what we've envisaged and which we are now accelerating in terms of our digital offering going forward. All of us are bombarded every day with very colorful diagrams depicting the hot topics of the moment. But we are really relying on our basic skills and understanding of the digital lifecycle management and certification, our own experiences in TOC automation and digitalization in Aerosud over the last 5 or 6 years, and our inherent affinity and not being afraid to digitalize business processes. And out of this, as Johan mentioned earlier, Aerosud Octai was formed in 2018. And from the logo, you can already see that we look at life slightly different. Just imagine a square orange. And they do exist, by the way. The first offering we have developed over the last 2 years is an integrated digital platform that is more than just another out-of-the-box PLM system and solution at a very exorbitant price. We looked for a very practical solution that can be deployed very quickly, that is very adaptable, that is highly customizable. A bit of a contradiction in terms if you look at other PLM systems where highly customization is not really recommended, and that is suitable for example, if you're a high-tech SME manufacturer, a design bureau, an electronics company, or a medical company. And we found such a solution in RAS Innovator. Our platform solution is built on the back of RAS as the digital platform. And I recommend that you take a look at Google and all the write-ups on RAS, especially the SIM data one. It gives you a very good background as to why one should consider RAS as the digital platform of choice. On the bottom of the screen, you will see a couple of examples of companies where we have done such implementations of our platform. Similarly to our skills in 3D printing, we started the project about a year ago where we looked at the digital design lifecycle in the full design loop that is used in typical systems engineering approach for design right through to certification for complex products. And given with that as a background, we also looked at how it is being done by SMEs in the 3D printing domain. We have found that it is extremely fragmented, and for most of them, Excel is the PLM solution. They may not be totally wrong, but Excel can go only that far. Somewhere there will be a need to have more clarity and structure in digital data management, and the processes in those environments have to be simplified and automated. And you will see that on the right-hand side of the screen. We have therefore developed a solution called MWorks, and again we've used a RAS Innovator as the digital backbone for the solution. The solution has now been developed to the point where we will bring it to market in the next 3 months as a standalone product that can be deployed and set up as either customer-centric or supplier-centric. And then the reality struck with us. Over the last 2 months, we were also affected by COVID-19 and the lockdown here in South Africa. What we found interesting is that we could very quickly, in roughly 2 weeks, deploy a digital platform on the backbone of what we already had in the company. We did that as part of a non-profit group of companies, universities, and research institutes. This digital solution can be used by anybody that is in the process of designing or developing or industrialization and or already bringing into production a new product or system that is in aid of COVID-19 activities in South Africa, and for that matter, anywhere else out into Africa or the world. I'm currently involved in one of those projects where we're doing a non-invasive ventilator solution. And I have found it very pleasant to work with our own platform and also apply CCEPM principles to manage that project. This roughly concludes my part of the presentation. So in closing, I can confirm that Aerosud in Aerosud, we build to last on a solid foundation of an agreed to goal, entrenched TOC principles such as flow, 5 focusing steps, single prioritization mechanism throughout the company. We use, and now this thing has died. We use critical change program management to run all our projects on. And we use world-class digital platforms to craft solutions that can be applied in our environment and to the benefit of other companies that has a need for that. Thank you very much for our time. I really appreciate it. And we hand over now to question and answers.